Welcome to week 5. Let's start today off with a poll. If you're going to go exploring for a day, would you rather go to Galveston or Anahuac? How about the Woodlands or Dayton? Or maybe Houston or Wallaceville? Some of us like that quiet small town feel. Others of us want the big city lights and endless options of things to see and do. Some of you may have grown up in a small town like a friend of mine where your high school graduating class was like 12 students. If that's you, Baytown probably feels huge. Do you know the smallest town in Texas is a place called Guerra? Guerra is down south, close to the border of Mexico. It's pretty much right between Laredo and McAllen, and it takes about an hour and a half to drive from either Laredo or McAllen to get to Guerra. But I'm not sure many people make that drive. Guess what the population of Guerra is? 6. Yeah, 6. How many families do you know with that many or more people in their very home? If you're gonna visit a place like Guerra, or better yet, live in a place like Guerra, you have to be okay with living a life that's different than most other people. You have to be okay with being one of the few, quite literally. I searched things to do in Guerra, and all I could find on every site were lists of nearby cities, and none of those cities were very close to Guerra. I'm just saying, if you're gonna live there, you gotta commit to it. Here at Second, we've got great community. It's not population 6, it's more like 700 who are present in the building on any given Sunday. But as big as that feels, the fact is we who follow Jesus in the world are the few. In Jesus' Sermon on the Mount, in Matthew chapter 7, verses 13 through 14, he said this, "Enter by the narrow gate, for the gate is wide and the way is easy that leads to destruction, and those who enter by it are many. For the gate is narrow and the way is hard that leads to life, and those that find it are few." Now, Jesus may have very well been making a population comparison between believers and unbelievers when he said that, but there's more to it than that. The self-proclaimed population of Christians in the world is much bigger than the actual population of Christians, which is only known by God. In Matthew 7, Jesus basically said the same thing when he said, "Not everyone who thinks they're going to heaven will actually receive the gift of eternal life." Sadly, there are people that in the end, he will look at and say, "I never knew you. Depart from me, you workers of lawlessness." Matthew chapter 7. There are true disciples and there are false disciples. And those false disciples are people who say they believe, but their lifestyle and choices do not reflect that belief. What we do, how we live over the long haul reveals what's in our hearts. That's the point Jesus made as he concluded the Sermon on the Mount. A heart turned to Jesus knows its own sinfulness and need for grace. So people with a heart for Jesus don't shake their heads in disgust at the failures of other people. They grieve those failures and want to help them get back on the right track because they know they need that same grace. People with a heart for Jesus don't go along with people who say they're for God, but whose lives show no evidence of that. People with a heart for Jesus don't shrug their shoulders at Jesus' teaching, thinking that it's just too hard to live like the few. They listen to those teachings and make it their aim to do them. And so their faith endures even during the hardest times and the biggest storms of life. We can't have it both ways. We can't belong to Jesus and belong to the world. James 3:12 puts it this way: "Can a fig tree, my brothers, bear olives, or a grapevine produce figs? Neither can a salt pond produce fresh water." Jesus was saying this. He's saying it's impossible to actually follow Jesus and not live like Jesus. It's not that the only way to be a Christian is to live perfectly like Jesus did. None of us can do that. But we must have a heart that seeks the perfect righteousness of Christ. 1 John 3, 9 and 10 tells us, no one born of God makes a practice of sinning, for God's seed abides in him. He cannot keep on sinning because he has been born of God. By this it is evident who are the children of God and who are the children of the devil. Whoever does not practice righteousness is not of God, nor is the one who does not love his brother. In other words, if it looks like a duck, walks like a duck, it's a duck. Those who belong to Christ have the characteristics of Christ because they are connected to him and he lives in them. The whole message of Jesus' Sermon on the Mount conveys that truth. When we are in Christ, our lives, our thoughts, our words, our behaviors are governed by faith. That's how we choose to live like the few. Jesus' half-brother James wrote it very plainly, starting in James 2:18. He said this, he said, show me your faith apart from works, and I will show you my faith by my works. You believe there is one God? You do well. Even the demons believe that and shudder. Do you want to be shown, you foolish person, that faith apart from works is useless? Was not Abraham our father justified by works when he offered up his son Isaac on the altar? You see that faith was active along with his works, and faith was completed by his works. And the scripture was fulfilled that says, Abraham believed God, and it counted to him as righteousness. And he was called a friend of God. You see that a person is justified by works and not by faith alone. In the same way, was not Rahab the prostitute justified by works when she received the messengers and sent them out another way? For as the body apart from the spirit is dead, so also faith apart from works is dead. Now, James might have been an Enneagram 8, the challenger, the one who speaks his mind and stands up for what he believes in. James would have no patience in 2023 with people who call themselves Christian and act no different than the people who don't claim any faith at all. He said, you foolish person, faith without works is useless. Then he gave evidence. Abraham, the patriarch of God's chosen people, the father of their faith, followed God's instruction to the point of giving up his son, who he loved more than anything in the world, if that's what was required. And just in case we might think that kind of faith only needs to show up in super important religious people, James gave Rahab as an example to follow. She wasn't religious or important at all in her culture. She was a prostitute. She would have been the sinful outcast of the religious leaders of Jesus' day. And Jesus points out how she showed great faith by risking her own life to save the lives of God's chosen people. God isn't looking for people with the best resumes. He's looking for people who have the kind of faith that shows up in real life situations. Faith without works is dead. That isn't meant to make us feel defeated or shame. It's meant to encourage us to chase after Jesus. So what do? How do we live lives that are governed by faith? Not just showing up and going through the motions, but really following Jesus to the point that we see ourselves before we judge other people and do the hard things Jesus calls us to do. We're going to look at one more verse before we talk in our groups. If you think about the people in Scripture who demonstrated what it really means to love and follow Jesus, no matter what, the Apostle Paul is probably in the top 5. Paul was a guy who, for his entire life, thought he was one of the few. But it wasn't until he met Jesus that he actually became one of the few, and everything changed. It couldn't have been easy, right? His whole life had been governed by the law, by doing what's right, according to what everyone he hung out with thought was good. How could he make such a gigantic shift in adulthood? It helps to consider what Paul wrote in Romans 12:2. He said, do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind, that by testing you may discern what is the will of God, what is good and acceptable and perfect. The world is going to say there are situations where you have the right to throw angry insults around, but as long as no one's causing physical harm, you're good. The world says adultery is bad, but lust, that's normal. Looking at pornography, no harm, no foul. Lies that hurt, bad, but lies that no one notices, and the list goes on through Jesus' teaching in the Sermon on the Mount. Swear that you mean what you say. Don't let people take advantage of you. Stick it to your enemies. Help people, but it doesn't count unless you post about it on Instagram. Accumulate all the things you want because life is short. Judge everyone and do it online so the whole world can get in on it. Build your life on what you want to build your life on, and as long as you're staying true to yourself. Do you see why Paul said don't conform to the world? You can't have it both ways. You either conform to the world or you let Jesus transform your mind and his word. You either discern what is the will of the many and go with that, or you seek to discern what is the good and perfect will of God and let him help you live that out. That kind of transformation doesn't happen all at once. It happens day by day by day to the few who choose to build their lives on the rock of God's word in a faith-filled, obedient relationship with the living word, Jesus Christ. We hope that Kingdom Culture has helped transform your life to make it look more like Jesus. Thank you for joining us for this special series, Kingdom Culture. Our hope and our prayer is that as you discuss the Sermon on the Mount in this series with your small group, that your walk with Jesus moves forward as we live in the kingdom of God every day.